Sometimes he wondered if anyone would even notice if he disappeared. Daniel was a kind of man who believed life had finally smiled on him. At just 32, he had a steady job in a small but promising company. Even though the pay wasn't that mega, he has a beautiful wife who adored him, and friends who always came around for Friday night laughs. His evenings were filled with the comforting aroma of home-cooked meals and the warmth of family photos on the walls. To anyone looking from the outside, Daniel had it all: a life stable enough to be envied, yet simple enough to feel attainable. Sometimes, after a sweet dinner with his beautiful wife, Daniel would play a calm, relaxing music in the sitting room while reflecting on how much he has accomplished in life. Deep inside, Daniel knew that stability was fragile. He worked long hours to keep things afloat, often telling himself, just a little more work, and life will get even better. I will buy my dream car and dream house. What he didn't know was that life had already begun shifting under his feet, and the cracks in his perfect world were slowly forming. It started with a meeting that seemed ordinary. Daniel walked into the office that day in his neatly ironed shirt, carrying his usual black briefcase. Upon entering the office, his boss was already sit on one of the fine office chairs. The air felt heavy, though, and his boss wouldn't meet his eyes. Then came the words no one wants to hear: "We're downsizing. Your role has been made redundant." His boss handed him the termination letter. The paper in his hand wasn't just a termination letter, it felt like a death sentence to the life he had worked so hard to build. Immediately his eyes glanced through the letter, tears almost rolled down his cheeks, but he quickly controlled himself. Daniel sat in the empty office long after everyone else had left. He couldn't believe what just happened while staring blankly at the desk he once called his own. Questions screamed inside his head. How do I tell my wife? How do I pay the bills? What will people say? The fear of failure wasn't just about money, it was about dignity. It was about losing the very identity he had built around his work. The apartment no longer carried the same warmth. Bills piled up on the table like silent reminders of his failure, and the once sweet conversations with his wife turned into heated arguments. She would pace the living room late at night, waving unpaid bills in her hand, her voice breaking between frustration and despair. Daniel, sitting on the couch with his face buried in his palms, barely had the strength to respond. One evening, after another bitter exchange, his wife whispered the words he dreaded: "I can't do this anymore, Daniel. I can't live like this." Within weeks, she was gone, leaving him with nothing but silence and the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the apartment. It was the silence that hurt the most. Daniel's days and nights became more boring. Days blurred into nights as Daniel sank deeper into despair. He stopped answering calls from friends because he couldn't bear their pity, or worse, their judgment. Social media became torture, each scroll showing people smiling, getting promotions, getting married, living the life he had lost. Alone in his dim apartment, with only a mattress on the floor and an old phone in hand, he felt invisible to the world. Sometimes he wondered if anyone would even notice if he disappeared. Should I end my life? He would sometimes think to himself. What's even the point of living? The thought of giving up whispered to him in the dead of night, when the walls seemed to close in. His life, once full of noise and laughter, had now shrunk to the sound of his own heavy breathing in the dark. Then one evening, everything shifted. Daniel was walking aimlessly through the city streets, hands shoved in his pockets while thinking of what his life has become. He noticed an old homeless man sitting at a bus stop. The old man's clothes were torn, his beard scruffy, and he held a cardboard sign that read, "Hungry. Anything helps." Daniel paused, looked at the poor hungry man with pity. He then checked his wallet. There was barely enough money left for his own dinner. For a moment, he hesitated. But something inside him, a small voice he hadn't heard in months, pushed him forward. He reached out for a sandwich he had bought earlier from a nearby shop and handed it to the man. The old man's eyes lit up with a gratitude so raw, it pierced Daniel's heart. "Thank you, son, you saved me tonight," the man whispered. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt something he thought he had lost: purpose. The next day, Daniel found himself drawn back to the same bus stop. Luckily, he saw the same man whom he helped the previous night. He didn't have money or sandwich to give the poor old man, but he offered conversation. He listened to the old man's story about how life had taken a wrong turn, about regrets, about hope that still lingered. And strangely, Daniel found comfort in it. Talking to someone who had lost even more than he had reminded him that he wasn't alone in his suffering. After listening to all the old man said, Daniel felt an awakening inside of him and said to himself, "I need to get my life back on track." Soon, Daniel began searching for lonely people online who needed someone to talk to. One night, while scrolling through his old phone, Daniel stumbled on an online community where people paid just to chat with someone who would listen. Curious, he signed up. Soon, he was talking to lonely people from around the world: widows, workers far from home, and people battling depression. To his surprise, many of them paid him for his time, and Daniel found not only comfort in these conversations but also a small but steady source of income. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. He would chat and even phone call some of his clients. This made him busy all day and sometimes at night. But to Daniel, it wasn't just about the chats, phone calls, or money. He was able to make new friends, slowly forget about his once boring and sorrowful life, and also clear some bills. Then one day, a regular client, a kind woman who often shared her struggles, told Daniel she admired his empathy and offered him a position at her company. Daniel did not hesitate to accept the offer as his heart was filled with joy. Finally, a new decent job, he thought to himself. Accepting the job was the turning point. At first, Daniel couldn't believe it. After everything he had lost, someone finally saw his worth again. The role was modest, but it came with steady pay, and for the first time in months, he could breathe. Slowly, he paid off the remaining bills that once haunted his nights, one envelope at a time. The apartment that felt like a prison began to look like a home again, filled with light and hope instead of silence. As weeks turned into months, Daniel regained his rhythm. He managed his work well, his confidence returned, and he even reconnected with old friends he had shut out during his darkest days. The man who once thought his life was over was now living with gratitude. He understood that sometimes life breaks you so that you can be rebuilt into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. One bright morning, Daniel walked past the same bus stop where it all began. The old man was no longer there, but Daniel paused, staring at the empty bench. He realized that the sandwich he once gave away was more than just food, it was the seed of his new life. A reminder that small choices, made with kindness, can open doors you never imagined. Daniel's story reminds us all, when life takes everything from you, it isn't the end, it may just be the beginning of something new. Sometimes purpose doesn't come from what you achieve, but from how you connect, give, and rise again.